Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for a Tax Practitioners Board webinar. My name is Anna Miliaskis, and I'll be hosting today's session. We've created this webinar to connect directly with you. We value your opinion, and today's an opportunity to raise any questions you have directly with us. To begin, I'd like to share some housekeeping tips so you get the most out of the session. First of all, you'll notice a range of icons on the top right corner of your screen. To ask a question or interact with other attendees, simply click the purple chat icon. Feel free to send through your questions and comments throughout the presentation, and we'll respond to you as we go. Just a note here that questions are visible to other attendees. If you have a question that's private in nature, please contact us via our online inquiry form at tpb.gov.au/contact. If we're unable to answer your questions today, we'll respond to you out of session. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please call Redback Support on the number listed in the help section of the top right menu, which is 1-800-733-416. Following the webinar, we'll provide a copy of today's presentation slides and some helpful links. We'll send these to you via the email address that you used to register for today's session. You can also access them by visiting the Webinar Resources Hub at tpb.gov.au/webinar-hub. I'd also like to remind you that today's webinar will count towards your CPE or CPD, and you can claim 1 hour for attending. However, we do not issue attendance certificates. In today's webinar, we'll look into what you need to do to maintain your registration with us. In particular, we'll unpack completing your annual declaration, notifying the TPB when your details or circumstances change, complying with the Code of Professional Conduct, renewing your registration on time, surrendering your registration, and what your clients should expect from you. Finally, to finish up, we'll answer some of the common questions we received during the webinar, so make sure you submit your questions via the chat box. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Peter DeCure. Peter is a professional non-executive director. His experience in tax matters has developed over a 25-year career as a tax partner with KPMG and as a registered tax agent for 16 years. Peter is a fellow of the Australian Institute of Company Directors and a fellow of Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand. He is chairman of the Australian American Fulbright Commission, the Royal Flying Doctor Service Central Operations, Gifford Hill Joint Venture, and Gifford Hill. He is also director of Accord Property Holdings and the Accord Property Development Fund, as well as Variety, a children's charity. Peter is an advisory board member of Tim Adams Wines and member of the Remuneration Tribunal of South Australia. Peter holds a Bachelor of Economics from the University of Adelaide and was appointed to the board in July 2017. Thanks for joining us, Peter. I'll hand over to you now to start the presentation.
Thanks, Anna. It's great to be here, and welcome to everyone who's tuned in today. And thanks to you for helping us kick off our 2021 TPB webinar program. I've also got several people assisting in the chat box today. We've got Leslie Ferris, Client Manager with the TPB, Client Engagement Manager, Sankar Soundararajan, Client Engagement Technical Advisor, and Julie Shaw, Communication Manager with the TPB. Leslie, Sankar and Julie will respond to the questions you send through during the webinar. Our main focus today is to unpack your ongoing registration requirements. At a high level, you need to comply with the Tax Agent Services Act 2009. I'll refer to that as the TASA. And you must complete an annual declaration, obviously every year, notify us when your registration details or circumstances change, comply with the Code of Professional Conduct, and renew your registration on time. Let's get started by looking at annual declarations. The annual declaration process is a simple way for you to provide assurance to the TPB that you are meeting your ongoing obligations in relation to registration. The annual declaration itself is a relatively straightforward process, and it is due before the anniversary of your registration expiry date. This means that it is due each year, except in the year that you renew your registration. For example, if your renewal is due in 2023, you will need to complete an annual declaration in 2021 and 2022, and then in 2023, you renew your registration. You won't need to pay for the annual declaration. The process is free. We will email you before your annual declaration is due. Therefore, it is important you keep your contact details up to date with us, including your email address. We'll go over this in more detail soon. It is important to know that failure to submit your annual declaration by the due date may result in us imposing an administrative sanction, including possibly a suspension or termination of your registration. If you do not submit your annual declaration, you may also lose access to the ATO online services for agents and their lodgement program. So best not to risk your registration. I won't go into the annual declaration process in any more detail because due to COVID-19, we've temporarily waived the requirement to complete an annual declaration for some practitioners. If your annual declaration is due on or before 30 June 2021, you do not have to complete it until 2022 or 2023 in cases where your registration renewal is due in 2022. However, if you would like to know more, we've developed a video guide that goes through completing your annual declaration on my profile on the TPB website, and it will provide you with a link to this video after today's presentation. Let's move on now to the next slide. We'll start looking at changes of details or circumstances. You are required under the TASA to notify us of certain changes in your details or circumstances. Let's look into this further. You must notify us in writing, either electronically or on paper, within 30 days on which you become aware or ought to become aware of any changes to your contact details, your practice structure, your legal or trading name, circumstances relevant to your registration, and your professional association membership. We'll go through each of these in more detail, starting with the changes to your contact details. If we ever need to contact you, it's imperative that we can reach you. This means you must always keep your contact details up to date with us. We will pass on your updated contact details to the ATO where necessary. The ATO update your practice contact details, email address and mobile number and certain client details. We'll send you links to further information on this matter after the webinar. It is also important to note that you may also need to update your address in your practice management software used for lodgement. You can change or update the following contact details using the My Profile section of our website. Your email address, your phone number, your business address or addresses. This address must include only the street address of the practice and a postal address for correspondence and notices. To do this, once you've logged into My Profile from the TPB website, simply click the Manage Registration Details button, which is down on the left-hand side of the page. You can see this part of My Profile on the slide at present with the button highlighted in red. From there, click Registration Details link, which you can see on the slide, and update each of the items as required. Let's move on to look at business structures and legal trading names. If you change how your practice is structured, there are certain steps that you must take. You must notify us about the changes, as you may need to apply for registration for the new business structure, which includes getting a new registration number to practice under. You must do this within 30 days if there is a change to a partnership or company. If you decide to operate or cease operating through a trust structure, in some circumstances, you may need to apply for a new registration. We'll send around more information on trust to help clarify this. You must also notify of any changes to your legal or trading name. You must attach evidence of the change, such as a certificate of trading name or marriage certificate. You can notify us about any of these changes by using the Contact Us form on our website. We'll send you a link to this again following today's webinar. You must also notify the ATO of any changes to your practice structure and your clients about any practice structure changes. If we approve the registration of your new business structure, You must obtain your client's permission before transferring them to a new business structure. The permission may be by way of a signed engagement letter or signed consent or other communication with your client. Additional requirements for tax financial advisors. It's good to note here, specifically for tax financial advisors, some of your contact details are given to us by the Australian Securities and Investment Commission, ASIC. And these details will need to be updated with ASIC via ASIC Connect. These include your business and service address, changes in your practice structure if you are an Australian Financial Services licensee, and changes to your legal or trading name if you are an AFS licensee or an authorised representative of a licensee. If you're not an AFS licensee or authorised representative, you must notify us of any changes to your legal or trading name. Again, we need to see evidence of these changes. Keep in mind that any updates you make with ASIC may take up to 7 days to appear on our records. Change of circumstances. Next, you must notify us if certain circumstances change. Specifically, you must notify us if you cease to meet one of the tax financial advisor, tax agent or PAS agent registration requirements, or if an event affecting your registration occurs. There are several events that you must notify us about, including when you are convicted of a serious taxation offence, convicted of an offence involving fraud or dishonesty, penalised for being a promoter of a tax exploitation scheme, sentenced to a term of imprisonment, and when you become an undischarged bankrupt or go into external administration. Anna will send a full list and more details after the webinar. To notify us of changes to your circumstances, simply complete our online form. I'll go into this in a little bit more detail later in the presentation. Changes to professional association membership. You must also notify us of any changes to your professional membership of a professional association. In particular, if you relied on being a voting member of a recognised professional association to gain your registration as a taxpayer, you must notify us if your membership status changes or your membership ceases. Again, you can do this by using our online form, Change Registration Details. This form will require you to provide details of the changes to your membership. I'll go over this online form now, but I will also mention here that if you didn't rely on your voting membership with a recognised professional association to gain your registration and your membership details change, you should update the membership details in My Profile. You can find the Change Registration Details online form at tpb.gov.au/change registration details. You can see the form up on the slide right now. Importantly, you can use this form to inform us of some changes that you've made. I mentioned earlier, including changes to your practice structure, your legal or trading name, your circumstances, as well as your membership of a recognised professional association, if you relied on your voting membership to gain your registration as mentioned previously. I've highlighted each of these fields on the screen in red. Again, Anna will send all of this information following the webinar, so don't feel like you have to frantically write this down now. Anna, I'll hand over to you now to conduct a quick poll about notifying the TPB of changes to your details or circumstances.
Excellent, thank you, Peter. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll now. It should pop up on your screen in just a moment. Please select the correct response from the multiple choice list. So the question we have for you goes as follows. A registered tax financial advisor changes their business address and email address. Who should they notify of these changes in relation to their registration? Should they notify the TPB, ASIC, or both the TPB and ASIC? So please take a moment to answer that poll question, and I'll come back in just a few moments and read out those results. And I'll just give it a few more moments. Okay, great. So it looks like about 16% of people said they had to notify the TPB. About 3% said they had to notify ASIC, and the vast majority, about 80%, said they had to notify both the TPB and ASIC. So Peter, I'll hand back to you to comment on those results.
Thanks, Anna. The correct answer is both the TPB and ASIC. As we've discussed, when advising of changes to your email address and other relevant contact details, you should notify the TPB via the My Profile section of our website. For a change to your business and service address, you should update these details with ASIC via ASIC Connect. Again, updates you make with ASIC may take up to 7 days to appear on the TPB records. Let's turn now and have a look at some other important ongoing registration requirements. You must comply with the Code of Professional Conduct, or the Code for short. It applies to all registered tax practitioners. The Code sets out the professional and ethical standards required of tax practitioners, including the obligations they have to their clients and to the TPB, and in relation to their own conduct. Let's briefly unpack the Code for those who are less familiar with it. 5 key principles. The Code has 14 items grouped under 5 key principles. The first key principle is honesty and integrity. Under this principle, you must comply with the taxation laws in the conduct of your own personal affairs. Additionally, if you receive money or other property from or on behalf of a client, and you hold the money or other property on trust, you must account to your client for it. Under the independence principle, you must act lawfully in the best interests of your client, and you must have in place adequate arrangements for the management of any conflicts of interest. The confidentiality principle outlines that you must not disclose information relating to a client's affairs to a third party without your client's permission, unless there is a legal duty to do so. Under the competence principle, you must provide a competent service, and you must take reasonable care in ascertaining the client's state of affairs and ensure taxation laws are applied correctly to their circumstances. Under the Code, you also have a series of other responsibilities outlining that you must not knowingly obstruct the proper administration of taxation laws, advise your client of their rights and obligations under the taxation laws that are related to the tax financial advice services, BAS services, or tax agent services that you provide. You must maintain professional indemnity, PI insurance, that meets our requirements, and you must respond to requests and directions from the board in a timely, responsible and reasonable manner. I won't go into any more detail about the Code because we have a lot of available information, including previous webinars, and I'll ask Anna to pass this information along after today's webinar. Let's move on to renewing your registration on time. We have one ongoing final registration requirement to discuss, and this is your obligation to renew on time. You must apply to renew your registration at least 30 days, but not more than 90 days before it expires. You will remain registered until we make a decision on your application or you withdraw your application, whichever occurs first. We aim to process complete applications within 30 days of receiving the renewal form and payment of the application fee. If approved, your registration will be renewed for at least 3 years. The application fee is currently $700 for tax agents, $140 for BAS agents, and $560 for tax financial advisors. It is not subject to GST, and you must pay the application in full, a fee in full, when you apply to renew your registration. There are certain requirements that you must meet to renew your registration. If you're an individual taxpayer, you must be a fit and proper person. You must satisfy the qualifications and relevant experience requirements. You must meet our continuing professional education, CPE requirements. You must maintain PI insurance that meets our requirements at the time you apply for renewal of your registration. And you must complete an online application fee, pay the appropriate fee, and provide all supporting documentary evidence. For individual tax financial advisors, this includes that you are or have been an AFS licensee or a representative of an AFS licensee within the 90 days preceding your application. Again, we'll send out for more information on this after today's webinar. If you're a company or a partnership tax practitioner, you must meet the following requirements to renew your registration. Each director and or partner must be a fit and proper person. You must maintain PI insurance that meets our requirements at the time you apply for renewal of the registration. You must show that you have a sufficient number of registered individual tax practitioners to provide tax agent, BAS agent, or tax financial advice services to a competent standard and to carry out supervisory arrangements within the practice. In addition, if you're a partner in a partnership, you must not be under external administration, not have been convicted of a serious taxation offence or an offence involving fraud or dishonesty during the previous 5 years. You must complete an online application form and provide all supporting documents. If you fail to renew your registration before it has expired, you cannot legally provide tax agent, BAS agent or tax financial advice services for a fee or other reward. You will also lose access to the ATO online services where that's applicable. If your application is rejected, we will advise you of the reasons for our decision and of your appeal rights. We will notify ASIC and the ATO of our decision. Before we move on to discuss how you can find if your registration expiry date, I'd like to focus on some key renewal requirements. Firstly, I'd like to look at the fit and proper person requirement. There are certain events that would affect whether you are a fit and proper person to be registered. We consider the following: whether the individual is of good fame, integrity and character, whether any of the following events have occurred in the previous 5 years, the individual has become convicted of a serious taxation offence, the individual has been convicted of an offence involving fraud or dishonesty, the individual has been penalised for being a promoter of a tax exploitation scheme, the individual has been penalised for implementing a scheme that has been promoted on the basis of conformity with the product line in a way that is materially different from that described in the product line. The individual has had the status of an undischarged bankrupt. The individual has been sentenced to a term of imprisonment or served a term of imprisonment in whole or in part. If any of these events have occurred in the past 5 years, you'll be asked to provide details of the event that occurred. Again, I'll get Anna to send around more information about these events. If a tax practitioner ceases to meet the fit and proper person requirement, we may terminate their registration or impose another sanction. Next, let's focus on the TPB CPE requirements. For individual tax practitioners, when renewing your registration, you must show us that you are undertaking CPE that meets our requirements. CPE is the process by which you maintain and enhance the required knowledge and skills relevant to the tax practitioner services that you are registered to provide. It builds upon the primary qualifications you use to gain initial registration as a tax practitioner. It is imperative that your knowledge and skills adapt and improve as the law, society, and our individual practice changes. CPE supports you to maintain and improve your knowledge and skills, keep up to date with developments in relevant taxation laws and administration, including increasing importance of cybersecurity in your business practices. It helps you to maintain and build upon your primary qualification. The number of CPE hours you should complete depends on your registration type. For a standard three-year registration period, this is generally, for tax agents, a minimum of 90 hours of CPE with a minimum of 10 hours each year. For a tax financial advisor, a minimum of 60 hours of CPE with a minimum of 7 hours each year. For BAS agents, a minimum of 45 hours of CPE with a minimum of 5 hours each year. If your registration period is other than 3 years, you should complete the CPE on a pro rata basis. Sometimes CPE is awarded through professional associations on a points earned system. We accept that 1 hour of relevant CPE will be considered 1 hour of CPE for the purposes of the TPB, irrespective of the points awarded. You should maintain a record of your CPE activities in a contemporaneous way. We may request that you provide evidence of the CPB that you have completed at any time throughout your registration period, including when we are considering renewing your registration. We have lots of other information on CPE at the TPB website. I'll get Anna to send around the links following the presentation, including information on how many hours you're expected to complete. The last requirement I want to discuss today is professional indemnity insurance, or PI insurance. You may be wondering whether you need PI insurance. If you charge a fee or receive a reward for the provision of tax practitioner services, you will need to have an appropriate PI insurance policy or cover in place. If you do not charge a fee or receive a reward, for example, you are an employee or a contractor, you will not need to have your own PI insurance policy in place. However, if you're an employee or a contractor, you will be required to provide us with the name of your employer or principal and their registration number. Regardless of whether you charge a fee or receive a reward, you have to notify us of how you met our PI insurance requirements through your annual declaration or renewal application. Importantly, I'd like to highlight that before 1 January 2021, when renewing your registration, you have to demonstrate that you maintain or will be able to maintain PI insurance that meets our requirements. As of 1 January 2021, you must demonstrate at the time of applying for renewal that you maintain PI insurance that meets our requirements. This is an important distinction, and this law change applies to all renewal applications on hand, but not decided before 1 January 2021. So just to make that sure, make that clear, from 1 January 21 onwards, you must have PI insurance in place at the time of applying for a renewal. As an important side note, I'd also like to point out that you must update your PI insurance details whenever there is a change in your policy, including every time the policy is renewed. You should update this information as soon as the change occurs. You can do this through the My Profile section on the TPB website, which I highlighted earlier. When updating your details, you will need to provide your policy number, the name of your insurer, the start and end date of your policy, and the amount of the cover. I'd now like to move on and talk about some differences between TPB and ASIC requirements. Just a quick note here for all of the tax financial advisors listening today, our PI insurance requirements are generally consistent with ASIC's requirements for AFS licensees. However, there are two key differences. We require PI insurance coverage to include tax advice. ASIC's requirements do not extend to tax advice. Our PI insurance requirements apply to all representatives who are registered with us, including authorised representatives, and not just to AFS licensees. Anna, I'll hand back to you for another quick poll about PI insurance.
Great, thanks again, Peter. So I'm going to launch another poll now. It should pop up on your screen in just a moment. From the list, please select which type of PI insurance coverage you have in play. So the options are, I have my own policy, or I'm covered by the policy of another registered tax practitioner. So I'll give you all just a few moments to answer that poll, and I'll read the results in just a moment. And I'll just give it a few more seconds. Great, it looks like we have about 83% of people saying they have their own policy in place, and about 17% of people are saying they're covered by another registered tax practitioner. So an interesting split there. Peter, back to you.
Thanks, Anna. It's good to know that we've got both practitioners in their own right and people who are covered by other practitioners on the seminar. And it is one of the most important items for practitioners, because one of our key roles is consumer protection, and it's great to know that practitioners are making sure they're protecting their customers properly. Let's now have a look at how you can find your registration expiry date. The easiest way to find your registration expiry date is by searching the TPB register. To search the public register, you go to tpb.gov.au/registrations_search. You can also use My Profile to locate your registration expiry date. First, log on to My Profile via the TPB website, then click the registration details button on the left-hand side of the page. We have highlighted this button in red on the slide. This will open a new page and your registration expiry date is listed about halfway down the page. You can also see this highlighted on the slide. As we've said, we give you reminders of your renewal or annual declaration, annual renewal requirements, but at the end of the day, it is your responsibility to keep up to date with your registration expiry date. I'd like to take a look at two case studies now to help put the things that we've discussed so far into some more practical context. In the first case study, the Board Conduct Committee, BCC, terminated the registration of a tax agent following findings of several code item breaches that I'll go over now. Code item 1 requires that you act with honesty and integrity. In this case, the relevant agent failed to disclose their own overdue personal tax obligations and the fact that they'd been disqualified as a trustee under the Superannuation Industry Supervision Act in their registration renewal application and annual declarations. The practitioner also provided false and misleading information to the board in response to its inquiries. Code item 2 states that a tax practitioner must comply with taxation laws in the conduct of personal affairs. The tax agent failed to ensure independence of the audit of several superannuation fund annual returns, lodged their returns and those of related entities on time, didn't pay their tax debts and those of related entities on time, and didn't properly declare reportable income and keep accurate records, resulting in the imposition of penalties. The tax agent also breached Code Item 7, which requires the agent services to be provided competently, by failing to make sufficient inquiries to ensure that the income tax returns lodged on behalf of a number of clients were correct. Finally, the tax agent breached Code Item 9, which requires you to take reasonable care to ascertain the client's state of affairs. In lodging a client's tax returns, the tax agent failed to ascertain the client's entitlement to be claiming work-related deductions. In addition to the above breaches, the agent was also found to have breached Code Items 11 and 14 as they deliberately obstructed the proper administration of taxation laws and were discourteous in their dealings with the Tax Practitioners Board and the ATO. The BCC found that the agent had ceased to meet the fit and proper person registration requirements and terminated the registration and prohibited the agent from reapplying for registration for a period of 5 years. Our next case study focuses on a tax financial advisor. ASIC referred this tax financial advisor to us as they had been banned from providing financial services until October 2024. In investigating this matter following the referral from ASIC, the BCC found that the tax financial advisor had ceased to be an AFS licensee or representative over 3 months earlier, noting this is one of the requirements registered tax financial advisors need to meet to maintain their registration with us, did not ensure that his related entities met their tax obligation, failed to lodge his annual declaration for 2019 despite repeated reminders from the TBB, made a false and misleading statement to the board in an annual declaration he lodged on behalf of a related entity. The BCC decided to terminate the tax financial advisor's registration for failing to continue to meet the registration requirement of being an AFS licensee or a representative of an AFS licensee due to the ASIC ban. Having had a pretty good overview of what you need to do to maintain your registration, I'd like to switch gears now and discuss how you can surrender your registration if that's an appropriate thing for you to do. There are several reasons why you may want to surrender your registration. For instance, if you are retiring or selling your practice, if you're changing your business structure and you want to register a new entity, or you're becoming an employee of another registered tax practitioner. Keep in mind that if you do decide to surrender your registration, you will need to let us know of that choice in writing. Again, how to notify us, you can use the same contact us online form that I mentioned earlier to surrender or cancel your registration. This time you'll need to select the surrender registration option, which I've highlighted on the screen above in the change registration section of our website. When you surrender your registration, we must terminate your registration unless we consider that due to a current investigation or the outcome of an investigation, it would be inappropriate to do so. As of 1 January 2021, we may also refuse to accept your surrender request if we start to investigate you within 30 days of receiving the surrender notice and we consider that it would be inappropriate to terminate your registration until we finish the investigation. If we decide not to accept your request to surrender your registration, we will provide written notice to you within 30 days of the decision. We will give you reasons for the decision and we will give you information on your rights of review. If we decide to accept your request to surrender your registration, we'll provide you with a written notice within 30 days of that decision, provide you with the reasons for the decision, advise you of the date your registration will cease. This will usually be 35 days from the date we notify you. We'll provide you with information on your rights of review, and we'll notify the ATO and ASIC of the decision and the reasons for the decision. And we will publish the decision by way of a notifiable instrument. On the date your registration ceases, your access to the ATO electronic interface systems will be closed, meaning you can no longer access systems such as the online services and portals. You will not be able to legally provide tax practitioner services for a fee or other reward after your registration has ceased. If you want to operate as a registered tax practitioner, you will need to submit a new application for registration and wait until that application is approved. I'd like to just go through your obligations before the registration ceases. Before your registration ceases, you have certain obligations that you need to meet, including advising your clients that you are no longer a registered tax practitioner to allow them to make alternative arrangements for their future needs. Ensuring your clients' affairs are finalised before your registration ceases. As we discussed earlier, if you are transferring your clients to another registered tax practitioner, you must obtain your client's permission before doing so. You must notify the ATO of the reasons for surrendering your registration, tax and BAS agents. That's for tax and BAS agents only. What your clients should expect from you. Before we move on to questions, I'd like to briefly touch on what your clients should expect from you as their registered tax practitioner. When it comes to what your clients should expect, they should anticipate that you will ask questions to better understand their situation, that you will ask them to substantiate and provide evidence of any claims that they make, that you will not act illegally even if it seems to be in their best interests, and that you will advise them of their tax obligations under the taxation laws. We have a handy information sheet for clients which summarises all of this information. We'll be sending a link to it after the presentation. We recommend that you provide this to your clients to help manage their expectations of your services. Additionally, we recommend using engagement letters to help establish a mutual understanding between you and your client of expectations and responsibilities. They also provide many other benefits for you and your clients. Whilst it's not a requirement that you use engagement letters while being registered with us, they are, in our view, an important tool and set out the agreed terms and conditions of engagement with your client. Anna, I'll hand back to you to administer any questions that have been coming through today.
Great, thanks, Peter. Just before I jump into questions, I just want to remind everyone that we'll be sending out a copy of the presentation as well as some helpful links after the webinar today. So you will get a copy of these slides. You can also access them by visiting the Webinar Resources Hub at tpb.gov.au/webinar-hub. So if you're keen to get those slides, just hold tight and we'll be sending those out. Great, so let's look at some questions now. Peter, the first one I have for you here is, does a tax practitioner have to be a member of a recognised professional association?
Thanks, Anna. Professional association membership isn't a mandatory requirement. However, if you relied on voting membership of a professional body to meet the registration requirements, you need to maintain that voting membership status while you are registered. It is an ongoing requirement. If you don't maintain the membership status, or you may have your registration terminated, this assumes that you don't meet any other specific eligibility item.
Great, thanks, Peter. We've had a few questions about PI insurance as well. So I'll put this one forward. Do tax practitioners need to notify the TPB when they renew their professional indemnity insurance every year, or can it wait until they complete their annual declaration?
You must update your details whenever there is a change in your PI insurance policy, including every time the policy is renewed. So you can advise us of your PI insurance arrangements by visiting My Profile, which you can find on the tpb.gov.au/myprofile web address. Please make sure that you have your username and password handy to sign in. Then you just need to select PI insurance from the left-hand menu and update your details there.
Great, thanks, Peter. We also tend to get this question quite often about CPE. So do CPE hours start from the date you registered, or is it a calendar year?
CPE hours start from the date of your registration. So it's not a calendar year, it's the year from the date of your registration.
Excellent, thank you. The next question we have is, in the webinar, you said engagement letters are not compulsory, but a professional association may require a tax practitioner to have them in place. Could you please explain this a little bit more?
Yeah, well, as we said in the webinar, engagement letters are not a specific requirement under the TPB Code of Professional Practice or Professional Conduct, even though we highly recommend them for your use. That said, most professional associations in their own rules do require you to have them in place as part of your membership obligations with them, if you hold a public practice certificate with the professional association. So I would suggest that you contact your professional association to confirm their requirements if you're unsure.
Thanks, Peter. We have another question about annual declarations and renewals. There tends to be some confusion about the differences between them. So isn't the annual declaration the same process as a renewal?
No, the annual declaration happens once a year and is done to demonstrate to the TPB and provide assurance to us that you meet your ongoing registration requirements as a registered tax practitioner in between renewals. Your renewal is every 3 years. The annual declaration process is different. We don't ask all the detailed questions about qualifications and experience, and there is no payment required for an annual declaration. The detailed questions and payment requirements are with your registration renewal, which is every 3 years.
Excellent, thank you. And a final question I'll pull up now. In what circumstances would the TPB terminate a tax practitioner's registration?
There's several reasons why we may decide to terminate a registration, including if you no longer meet one of the ongoing registration requirements. For example, if you cease to be a fit and proper person, or if you don't maintain PI insurance, your registration would most likely be terminated. If there's an event affecting your registration has occurred, for instance, you've become a bankrupt or under external administration. If you've breached a condition of registration, or if you've breached the Code of Professional Conduct, or your company is registered as a tax practitioner but is no longer registered with ASIC. If we decide to terminate your registration, as I said earlier, we will provide written notice to you within 30 days of the decision. We will provide you with the reason for the decision. We will include the period during which you will not be eligible to reapply for registration, if there is one applicable. We'll advise you of the date your registration will cease. That's usually 35 days from the date we notify you. We'll provide information on your rights of review. We will notify the Commissioner of Taxation and or ASIC of the date your registration ceases. If your registration has been terminated, The reason for your termination will be recorded on the TPB register unless your registration was terminated due to being surrendered by you. The record remains on the TPB register for 12 months from the date your registration was terminated.
Excellent, thanks Peter. We've had quite a few other questions come through today. I just want to remind everyone in the audience that if we couldn't get to your question today, we'll respond to you out of session, and that includes some of the email inquiries we're getting as well. So that wraps up questions. Peter, if you just want to move on to let everyone know how they can stay in touch with the TPB.
Thanks, Anna. As we always say at these things, please stay in touch with us at the TPB. If you'd like more information and to keep up to date, please visit our website at tpb.gov.au. You'll find plenty of detailed information there. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter. Unlike Donald Trump, we haven't been banned. We also have a newsletter that goes out each month called TPB e-News. You can subscribe to e-News at tpb.gov.au/newsroom. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel to receive notifications when we post new videos. We record all our videos and have a comprehensive library of webinars available for you to view at your leisure. You can still claim CPE for viewing and CPD for viewing these videos. I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. Sincerely hope 2021 is a happy and prosperous year for you all and your family. Stay healthy, stay safe, and keep in touch with the TPB. Anna, back to you to wrap up today's session.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you so much for providing us with all of that useful information, and a special thanks also to Sanka, Leslie and Julie for answering questions through the chat box. Thank you also to everyone in the audience for joining us today. We hope you found this webinar beneficial. It's a great way for you to keep up to date, and as was said, it can count towards your CPE. Remember though, we don't issue attendance certificates. If you're interested in attending more of our webinars, go to tpb.gov.au/webinars. Before we finish up, I'll be launching an exit survey. We'd appreciate it if you could take the time to complete this survey, as it only takes a moment and your feedback helps us to improve our webinars and lets us know of any topics that are of interest to you. The survey will open in your browser once you leave the webinar today. Once again, thank you all for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.